The December air bit at his skin as James Hollister trudged up the front steps of the small rented house he shared with his daughter. His fingers, raw from the day's work, fumbled for the key in his coat pocket. The door stuck a little in the frame, swollen from years of winter damp, and he gave it a sharp shove with his shoulder before it groaned open. Inside, the house was quiet. The old clock on the wall ticked away with a hollow sound. The place smelled faintly of wood smoke from the stove and the faint citrus cleaner he used sparingly. There was no smell of pine, no wreath, no garland draped around the windows. Christmas was only a few days away, and yet their home carried none of the festivities others in the neighborhood seemed to boast. James noticed it every time he walked home. He saw it in the glowing windows of houses down the street, trees twinkling with lights, stockings hung in neat rows, laughter spilling through the glass when families gathered. He wanted that for his little girl. God knew he did. But money was tight. It was always tight. Since Mary, his wife, had passed 3 winters ago, things had gone from hard to harder. He juggled long hours at the factory with raising his daughter, Emily, alone. Emily. Just the thought of her made the tension in his shoulders ease a little. She was 3 years old, small as a bird, with curls the color of roasted chestnuts and eyes so big and bright they seemed too heavy for her tiny face. She was the only light in this dim house, the only reason James kept going, working, striving. As he set down his work bag by the door, James heard it. Her laughter, a soft tinkling giggle that carried down the hall. He followed the sound to the living room, expecting to find her playing with her ragged dolls or pretending to host a tea party with her stuffed bear. But when he stepped into the room, his heart stopped. The floor was littered with something golden. Shimmering strips of paper, gleaming like coins, lay scattered about. At first he didn't understand what he was looking at. Then he saw the empty cardboard roll lying near her feet, its edges frayed and bare. It was the roll of gold wrapping paper, the one he'd bought weeks ago, carefully budgeting the extra few dollars for it, planning to use it to wrap the few small gifts he'd scraped together. He had hidden it away in the closet, meaning it to stretch, to make Christmas morning look a little brighter, a little more magical for his little girl. And now it was gone, wasted. Emily sat cross-legged in the middle of the floor, a shoebox in front of her, her small hands smoothing the last scraps of paper over its lid. Her little tongue poked out between her teeth in concentration. She was humming as she worked, unaware of the storm gathering in her father's chest. "Emily!" His voice came out sharper than he intended. She looked up, startled. Her big brown eyes widened, and a smile spread across her face. "Daddy, look what I'm making!" But he didn't see her smile. He didn't see her pride. He only saw the golden paper, torn, crumpled, wasted. He saw the dollars it had cost, the hours he had worked, the sacrifices he had made. The frustration of months, the fatigue of years welled up in him at once, and he snapped. "What on earth have you done?" His voice thundered, filling the little room. "Do you have any idea what that cost? That paper wasn't for playing. It was for Christmas, your Christmas. And now it's ruined. All of it." Emily froze, her little hands clutching the box. Her eyes brimmed with tears. I'm sorry, Daddy. I was just... "Just what? Just wasting? Just throwing away the only nice thing we had?" He took a step toward her, towering above her small form. "Do you think this is easy, Emily? Do you think money grows on trees? I work every day, breaking my back, and for what? So you can waste what little we have?" The tears spilled down her cheeks now. She pulled the box close to her chest, her shoulders shaking. "I just wanted to make you a present," she whispered. Her small, trembling voice cut through his rage like a knife. But James was too far gone to stop. A present? What kind of present? That's nothing but a ruined box. You've ruined everything, Emily. The words echoed in the room, hanging heavy in the silence that followed. Emily lowered her head. The golden box slipped from her hands and thudded softly onto the carpet. She sat still for a moment, her tiny body trembling, then scrambled up and ran down the hall, her sobs muffled by the walls as she disappeared into her room. James stood there, his chest heaving, his fists clenched. He felt the anger slowly ebb, leaving in its place something heavier: guilt. The house was silent again, save for the faint, hiccuping cries from her daughter's room. He looked down at the box on the floor. Its edges were uneven, the paper wrinkled and torn, but he could see where her little hands had tried to smooth it flat, where she had tucked the ends carefully. It was sloppy, imperfect. And yet she had been trying, she had been creating something for him. James sank into the worn armchair, burying his face in his hands. He hated himself in that moment, hated his temper, his blindness, his inability to see the innocence in her gesture. All she wanted was to give him a gift. All he had given her in return was anger. In her room, Emily cried herself to sleep, clutching her ragged teddy bear, the sound of her father's harsh words replaying in her small heart. The golden box lay abandoned in the living room, its secret safe inside.
The next morning came with the stillness of winter. Snow had fallen lightly during the night, frosting the windows in delicate patterns and muffling the world outside. The house was quiet, save for the faint crackle of the stove fire and the soft creak of floorboards as James rose early. He had not slept much. His mind had replayed the scene over and over, the golden paper scattered across the floor, his daughter's tear-streaked face, the sound of her little feet pattering away from him. Shame pressed heavily on his chest. He had meant to provide, to protect, but instead he had lashed out at the only person in the world who mattered to him. James poured himself a cup of bitter coffee and stood at the window, staring out at the yard where the snow lay untouched. In houses down the street, faint glows flickered as families stirred awake, children likely already tugging at stockings or tearing into packages. He thought of Emily, asleep in her small bed with her threadbare quilt, and the thought twisted inside him. He had taken her joy and crushed it beneath his anger. He resolved to make it right, though he wasn't sure how. A soft sound interrupted his thoughts, the light pad of bare feet on the wooden floor. He turned, and there she was, standing in the doorway of the living room. Her curls were mussed from sleep, her cheeks flushed pink from the cold. She wore her faded flannel nightgown, its hem brushing her ankles. "Good morning, Daddy," she said quietly. James set down his cup and kneeled to her level. "Good morning, sweetheart." His voice cracked. He wanted to say more, to pour out apologies, but the words stuck in his throat. Emily held something behind her back. She shifted from foot to foot, suddenly shy. Then, with a small breath of courage, she brought it forward. It was the box, the same gold-covered shoebox he had scolded her over the night before. She had smoothed the wrinkles as best she could, taped the corners neatly, and tied a piece of frayed red ribbon around it. In her little hands, it looked more precious than any gift money could buy. "This is for you, Daddy," she said, her eyes shining with a mix of hope and nervousness. James felt his chest tighten. His eyes stung. He reached out slowly, as though the box might vanish if he moved too quickly. "For me?" he whispered. She nodded eagerly. "Yes, I made it just for you." He took the box carefully, like it was something fragile, and set it on his lap. His rough hands trembled slightly as he tugged at the ribbon and lifted the lid. The box was empty. For a moment, James blinked in confusion. He turned it slightly, peering inside again as though something might have been tucked into a corner he had missed. But there was nothing, just the hollow cardboard interior. A fresh wave of irritation rose unbidden. The words escaped his mouth before he could stop them. "Emily, it's empty." His voice was sharper than he meant. He looked at her, his brow furrowed. "Don't you know, when you give someone a present, there's supposed to be something inside?" Her little face fell. Tears welled in her eyes, quick and sudden, like raindrops on glass. Her small voice quivered. "Oh, Daddy, it's not empty at all." She pressed a tiny hand to her chest, as though steadying herself. "I blew kisses into the box. They're all for you, Daddy." The room seemed to stop breathing. The clock ticked faintly in the silence. Outside, a bird chirped once before falling quiet. James felt the words like a blow. He stared at his daughter, her wide, earnest eyes shining with tears, and something inside him broke wide open. His anger, his pride, his frustration, all of it crumbled under the weight of her innocence, her pure love. He dropped the box onto the couch and pulled her into his arms. She was so small, her body warm against his chest, her little arms clinging to his neck. His throat tightened as he buried his face in her curls. "Oh, Emily," he whispered, his voice choked with sobs he could no longer hold back. "I'm so sorry. I didn't understand. I was so wrong." She sniffled against him. "It's okay, Daddy." "No," he said firmly, pulling back just enough to look into her face. His own eyes were wet, his vision blurred. "I hurt you. I yelled when you were only trying to love me. Can you forgive me, sweetheart?" Her little brow furrowed in thought. Then, with a small breath of courage, she nodded. Her lips curved into a tiny, forgiving smile. "I forgive you, Daddy." The words undid him. He held her again, rocking her gently, his tears falling silently into her hair. He realized, in that moment, that this child had given him the greatest gift he would ever receive. Not a box of kisses, but unconditional love. For the rest of the morning, James and Emily stayed together in the living room. He made her oatmeal with cinnamon, and they ate by the fire. They sang songs, played with her dolls, and built towers of wooden blocks. The golden box sat on the mantel, its ribbon glinting faintly in the firelight, a silent witness to the fragile beauty of forgiveness and love. That night, after Emily had fallen asleep in her little bed, James sat alone in the armchair with the box in his lap. He traced its edges gently, feeling the wrinkles beneath his fingertips. He thought of his late wife, of the struggles of the past years, of his endless fight to hold everything together. And then he thought of his daughter, how she had chosen love over resentment, how she had filled an empty box with something invisible but eternal.
James closed his eyes and pressed the box to his chest. For the first time in years, he whispered a prayer. Not for more money, not for easier days, but simply a prayer of thanks. For Emily, for her heart, for the invisible kisses he would carry with him always.
In the days that followed, the golden box became more than just a decorated shoebox. It became a symbol. James set it carefully on the nightstand beside his bed. Each evening before sleep, he would glance at it, and the memory of Emily's words would soften the edges of his rough day. Sometimes he even opened it, peering inside as if expecting to see the kisses drifting in the air, invisible but real. And in a way, he did feel them. Whenever his burdens threatened to crush him, when the bills piled high, or his body ached from long shifts at the factory, he would lift the lid, inhale deeply, and imagine one of Emily's tiny kisses landing softly on his cheek. He began to change in small but steady ways. Where once he had been quick to anger, now he paused, remembering the look in Emily's eyes when he'd shouted at her. Where he had once been consumed by stress, he found himself laughing more, letting the little things go. When Emily tugged at his sleeve and asked him to play, he no longer brushed her off with a tired excuse. Instead, he set down his tools or papers and said, "Of course, sweetheart, show me what you've got." Their evenings were filled with giggles and games. Emily taught him how to host elaborate tea parties, pouring tea from a chipped plastic pot into mismatched cups. She made him wear silly hats fashioned out of newspaper, crowning him King Daddy, while she reigned as Princess Emily. On snowy afternoons, they bundled up and trudged to the small park at the end of the street, where Emily made snow angels and James pushed her on the creaking swing until the sky turned violet. Neighbors noticed the change, too. "You've got your spark back, James," Mrs. Whitaker from next door remarked one day as she saw him pulling Emily on her sled. He only smiled in reply, but inside he knew the truth. His spark had always been there, waiting to be rekindled by a little girl's golden box. The days blurred into weeks, the weeks into months. Winter gave way to spring, then summer. The little house, though still modest and worn, seemed brighter now, filled with warmth and laughter. But life, as it often does, has a way of shifting in an instant. It was a Saturday morning in late September. The air was crisp, the sky a flawless blue. James had promised Emily a trip to the farmer's market in town. She loved the market, the stalls piled high with apples and pumpkins, the smell of fresh bread, and the musicians who played fiddles near the fountain. She especially loved the small carousel that sat at the edge of the square. Emily dressed herself that morning in her favorite yellow dress, the one with daisies on the hem. She slipped her tiny feet into scuffed brown shoes and proudly carried the little purse James had given her for her birthday. Inside, she had tucked a single quarter, her treasure, which she planned to spend on the carousel ride. They set off together in James's old pickup truck, the heater rattling as it blew warm air against the chill. Emily sang softly in the passenger seat, swinging her legs and clutching her purse. James glanced at her often, his heart swelling at the sight. At the market, they spent hours wandering from stall to stall. Emily picked out a shiny red apple, her eyes glowing with delight as she took a bite. Juice dribbled down her chin, and James wiped it gently with a handkerchief, laughing when she tried to chase him with sticky fingers. Finally, they reached the carousel. Her face lit up. She tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, can I, please?" James nodded. "Of course, sweetheart." She handed the operator her quarter and climbed onto a painted white horse, gripping the pole tightly as the carousel began to turn. James stood nearby, watching, his chest tight with love. She waved at him each time she circled around, her laughter rising above the music. But the joy of the morning would soon dissolve into tragedy. After the carousel ride, they made their way back toward the truck. The market was bustling, cars edging down the narrow street, pedestrians weaving between stalls. James held Emily's hand tightly, guiding her toward the crosswalk. They paused at the curb as a delivery van rumbled past. James waited until the road seemed clear, then stepped forward. In that instant, a car came speeding from the opposite direction, its driver distracted, not seeing the man and child stepping into the road. He heard it before he saw it, the screech of tires, the roar of an engine. He turned his head and his heart lurched. The car was bearing down on them, too fast, too close. Instinct took over. He shoved Emily forward, out of harm's way, but her little hand slipped from his grasp. She stumbled, her small body tumbling onto the pavement. The car swerved at the last moment, but not enough. The world shattered. When James opened his eyes again, there was shouting, people running. The car had skidded to a halt yards away. Emily lay motionless on the ground, her yellow dress crumpled, her tiny purse flung aside. "No, no, no, no!"
James's voice cracked as he scrambled to her side. He gathered her into his arms, cradling her fragile body. Her eyes fluttered weakly, her lips moving. "Daddy," she whispered. Her breath was faint, like a candle flickering. "I'm here, sweetheart," he choked out. Tears streamed down his face, falling on her hair. But there was no time, no ambulance fast enough, no doctor close enough. Emily gave the smallest smile, her gaze unfocused but filled with love. Then her body went still in his arms. The world around James blurred into chaos, sirens, gasps, the sound of someone weeping nearby. But inside him, there was only silence. A vast, hollow silence where Emily's laughter used to be. He clutched her to his chest, rocking back and forth on the cold pavement. His cries rose raw and broken, piercing the crisp autumn air. The golden box, waiting at home on his nightstand, would never again hold the kisses of a living child. But it would soon hold something else, a grieving father's only lifeline to the memory of a love too pure to ever fade.
The weeks that followed Emily's passing blurred into a haze of grief. James moved like a shadow through his days, his body present but his soul elsewhere. The house felt impossibly empty without the sound of her footsteps padding across the floor, without her voice calling "Batty" with uncontainable joy. Her toys remained in their places. The ragged teddy bear she used to clutch at night still sat on her pillow. Sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, James would find himself standing in the doorway of her room, gripping the frame until his knuckles whitened, as if he could somehow hold back the truth that she was gone. The golden box rested on his nightstand, just as it had before. For days, James couldn't bring himself to look at it. The sight of it made his chest ache, made the emptiness inside him feel unbearable. It was a relic of what he had lost, a reminder of her innocence and his failure to protect her. But one night, unable to sleep, James reached for it. His hands trembled as he lifted the lid. He stared into its hollow interior, as though expecting to hear her voice, to see her tiny face peering back. Instead, he felt something stir inside him, something gentle, something that softened the rawness of his grief. He remembered her words, whispered with all the faith of a child. "I blew kisses into the box. They're all for you, Daddy." He closed his eyes. For the first time since the accident, James let himself imagine her there, leaning close, filling the box with invisible kisses. And as he did, he felt one of them land on his cheek, warm and comforting, as though carried by the breath of memory itself. James broke down, sobbing into the darkness, but this time his tears carried not only sorrow, but also a trace of solace. He clutched the box to his chest, rocking gently, whispering into the night, "I feel them, sweetheart, I feel them." From that night on, the box became his lifeline. Whenever the weight of grief pressed too heavily, he opened the lid and took out one of Emily's kisses. He did it in the mornings before heading to the factory. He did it in the evenings when the loneliness became unbearable. He did it on her birthday each year, whispering to the silence how much he missed her. It became a ritual. The men at the factory sometimes noticed him holding the box during his breaks, staring at it with a tenderness they could not understand. He never explained. How could he? To them it was just cardboard covered in faded gold paper. But to James it was a treasury of love. The years passed, as years always do. James grew older, his hair graying, his body slowing. Yet through every season the golden box remained by his side. There were times when life felt especially heavy. When the factory laid off half its workers, James feared he would lose his home. On nights when the bills seemed impossible, he opened the box. "One more kiss, Emily," he whispered, and somehow he found the strength to carry on. When illness struck him in his later years, leaving him weak and bedridden, the box was there. Nurses and visitors noticed it, worn and shabby with time, resting faithfully on the nightstand. "Why do you keep that old thing?" one nurse asked once, smiling kindly. James only smiled faintly in return, his eyes drifting to the box. "Because it holds my whole world," he said softly. He never remarried. He never had another child. To some, his life seemed unbearably lonely, but James knew it wasn't. He carried Emily with him in every breath, every memory, every kiss he imagined taking from that box. In the quiet hours of his final days, when his strength waned and the end drew near, James lay with the box pressed gently against his chest. His breathing was shallow, his eyes half closed, but his lips moved faintly. Those who sat with him in his last moments heard him whisper, "Thank you, Emily. Thank you for loving me." And when his final breath left him, his face bore the faintest of smiles, as though in that instant he had opened the box one last time and felt his daughter's kisses carry him home. After James's passing, neighbors and friends sorted through his belongings. They found little of monetary value, just a man's modest possessions from a simple life. But when they found the golden box, worn and fragile, they paused. None of them knew its story. None understood its worth. Some suggested discarding it, but one woman, Mrs. Whitaker, who had often seen James with the box, stopped them. She took it gently in her hands and placed it back on the nightstand. "Leave it," she said quietly. "It belonged to his daughter."
And so it remained, a silent testament to the power of love, that even in the smallest, simplest gestures we can give someone a treasure they will carry for the rest of their lives. For the box was never truly empty. It was filled with what mattered most, and what endures beyond all loss, the invisible but eternal gift of love.